Welcome to WAY2B TV, where there's a better way to be than atheist or theist. It's called Judgment. And so here's tonight's video. By this point in the proposed speech, the contiguous line of thought seems obvious. 6 times the ancient writer already has the ancient speaker illustrating the shift from just doing religion to being in the way. His listeners are advised to build their character, a treasure contained within themselves, and they are advised not to be anxious while doing it. In this video, we see the ancient writer's depiction of the speaker's warning against mental meddling into the lives of others. The concept speaks profoundly to the great debate between atheists and theists today. The ancient writer has Jesus illustrating the circular nature of the problem. He says that judgment just begets similar judgment. Instead, one should put effort into improving oneself. Intentionally throwing righteous pearls of wisdom before dogs and swine requires one to first judge who are the dogs and who are the swine. Furthermore, one must also judge that their pearls of wisdom are indeed pearls. How easy is it to see that a conversation that begins, "Let me straighten you out," generally degrades into ruin? Mental meddling into the lives of others is the essence of judgment. Modern atheists express pearls of wisdom about the delusion of theists. Modern theists cast their own pearls about the godless immorality of atheists. Thus, atheist and theist are torn from understanding each other at all. Can belief and disbelief coexist? I think so, as long as we do not get our validation by judging who we are better than. The way this takes place is in trying to understand one another. A few so-called debates sound like intelligent conversation today. There are only a few theists and only a few atheists who have recognized this problem. They have begun to ask each other questions instead of making assertions about one another. By seeing the speck in another's eye, by seeing others as flawed, one is already judged. The need to judge alone is quite a log in your own eye. Until you can shed this need to judge, you cannot debate anyone. They will turn and tear you to pieces via the same measure by which you judge. The so-called great debate between atheist and theist causes so many to walk away from heated discussions with family, friends, and faith groups. Casting pearls of wisdom at each other leaves relationships torn to pieces. The greater wisdom today seems to have become to isolate ourselves from one another. This is especially true on Sunday. As a result, we huddle with those with whom we already agree. The greater conversation is thus squelched. In the next video, we will look at religion's famous name it and claim it passage. How does so-called provision really happen? Is it from God or from human beings? So how are you this evening, Miss Joni?
I'm almost as tired as you are.
Yeah, I am tired tonight. When you get right
Colleen
down to it.
says, I think that unfortunately the need to judge others is very ingrained in humans. And I think that boils down to who are you better than?
For the mistakes that you make. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk all the way through this or not. I am really, really hoarse tonight.
Do you have any water close by?
No, I don't. And I don't want to get up from here and go get it either. So
I would hand it
yeah.
to you, but I'm not close enough.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm going to have to go get me some water.
Colleen does say, I do fail, but it is my failures to myself that upsets me the most. And I think that's probably the way we're supposed to be.
Right.
Because you're the only one you can do anything about. You can't control anybody else's thoughts, actions, or feelings, and all you can do is tend to your knitting, as my mother used to say.
Right. Right. Well, I think tonight, I think the lesson was pretty simple tonight anyway about do not judge. You know, last week I read you an article that came out of Austin, Texas. Here are some of the quotes from it. I think they'll believe that Moses was the first American. Another professor said, this embodies the wrong-headed idea that the United States was founded on biblical law. Another educator wrote, we do our students a disservice when we scrub our history clean of unpleasant truths and when we present an inaccurate view of the past that promotes a simple-minded, ideologically driven point of view. Another professor, a college professor, says college faculty will see a generation of students ill prepared for the rigors of the history classroom, students who have never been taught how to think historically or to think for themselves. Another one wrote, there's just a concern about a bias against Christianity and eliminating BC and AD in the textbooks. Then she also said the only reason they started BCE is because they didn't want to recognize the significant role of Christianity in the history of the world. And then finally, I think the last comment that I read from that article last week was, evolution is a theory, cannot be considered fact. Our children have a right to know they did not necessarily evolve from a bug. Supreme Court decision, Engel versus Vitale, in 1962, was a landmark United States Supreme Court case that ruled it is unconstitutional for state officials to compose an official school prayer and encourage its recitation in public schools. I got an article here from the Washington Post. The Suitland football coach, Ed Shields, called his team to the middle of the field after a mid-September practice and told the players the 3-hour session was a waste. They would have to be better tomorrow, he screamed. Then he told them to pray before storming off the field. Every player took a knee, helmets off, sweat dripping, and each put a hand on another's shoulder. The boys continued to bicker about football and how angry their coach was. And that's when senior Stephen Rivers came to the front. Stop talking, Rivers shouted. A few players didn't stop talking. Rivers looked at them. You're on this team, right? Eventually it was silent, and the players bowed their heads and recited the Lord's Prayer. Rivers, who grew up in a nearby greenbelt, lowered his head too. And here's the part that I wanted to read to you. As a Muslim, he is not supposed to be saying a Christian prayer, but he's a team leader. And as he sees it, if you play for Suitland, you kneel and pray before and after every practice, before and after every game. I took world religion in seminary, and our seminary professor was pretty good at this. He was pretty good at presenting religions the way they were without trying to push a religion on you. Do the religions of the world affect your daily life? And I don't know how anyone in America could say, no, religion doesn't affect me. But you could look at religions. Are they matriarchal? Are they patriarchal? You could look at each one and say, what does it do? How does religion inform our attitude toward gender? How does a religion inform our attitude toward sex? How does religion inform our attitude toward morality? You could just go right through them. Put religion in the school in the way that a school works. Put it into a school in the way that school is there for. School is there for information and learning and for teaching you how to think, not what to think. And when we live in a country, let's narrow it down to America at first here. We live in a country where 75% or so self-identify with the Christian religion. All right? So is every other child in our classrooms supposed to just endure something that is not part of his heritage? His parents are teaching him something else, or her something else at home. Right?
Well, that's what learning is about, is opening your mind and thinking about other options. They're not set in stone. And that's pretty much what most religions teach, is this is what we believe, and if you're part of this, you believe it too.
I think the idea of religion being taught, comparative religion being taught in schools, is a good idea. Unfortunately, like you said, there are a lot of parents that are going to fight against it because they don't want anything to compare to their religion. But if kids don't get it in high school, so many of them don't go on to college where they could get that kind of an education. And so we've got people stuck in this religious mud hole and not being able to get, any information on the other religions except what they're being told by their church and their family.
We should have the classes at least because our world, although large, has become closer with the internet. She says even the Orthodox side of Catholicism is very different than what I grew up with, but I love them and miss going sometimes simply for the beauty of the service. And then she says, "Hello, Carol."
I agree that there are a lot of parents that wouldn't want that. I think the extreme religious right, maybe we could have a class that is an elective.
And then the article goes on and says, and as a Muslim, he was not supposed to be doing a Christian prayer. But because he wanted to be a team player and because he wanted to be a team leader, then he knew for his in his town, in his county or whatever, in his football program at his school, you said a prayer before and after every practice. You said a prayer before and after every game. And so he had to do that. And that is a classic example of the problem with trying to practice religion in school. You're forcing things on people. They won't even fit in. They feel like they're an outsider because you're doing a lot of things that don't fit their heritage, their culture, their learning at home. What their parents want to practice and what their parents know, including those who don't want to have any religion at all. Think about it. How many atheist parents do we have of children in classrooms, and those atheist parents aren't sending their kids to school to have them indoctrinated into any particular religion? My sixth grade teacher used to open every single class with reading the Bible. Okay? And that was in the sixth grade in early 1960s. I'd have to calculate the years backwards, but in the early 1960s. Well, that's exactly what the Supreme Court and what many people in this country don't want to happen. There are many people who are Christian people, devout Christian people, who go to church and very involved in religion, that don't want all those religious activities in the school. And so that's what right now that's what people are worried about in schools. They're worried about, are you going to take my kid, and in my textbook it's going to talk about Moses like he was Abraham Lincoln or something, okay? And in my kid's science book, it's going to talk about Adam and Eve as if that is an equal model to the creation or to the beginning of life in the universe to evolution in science. We can't do that.
I think it's a fine line between the law of the land and majority rule. Because most of the people who want their way just want their way. People will rail against it, and some people will accept it and learn.
Right. I think in the argument over whether or not to have comparative religion classes in school, you will see what the motivation is for some people related to all this wanting to have the Ten Commandments hanging on the wall and wanting to pray and wanting to do all this kind of stuff. That what they don't really want religion to be taught in the school. They want their specific beliefs. I am watching quite a bit more stuff these days than I used to, where people are asking each other questions instead of making accusations or assertions about each other. And they're asking each other questions. And if the atheist and theist communities would try to understand one another and get to know one another and listen to one another, you might actually have something, okay? But I'm just hoping that we can play a part in that sort of thing. You're going to teach mythology. Put all these characters in a mythology. Put Jesus in a mythology class, because that's where Jesus would have to go. Because we don't have enough data, enough information on Jesus to know. We know that Jesus is a story. We know that it's a story, in my opinion, full of very good advice. We know that it's a story worth learning. Okay. But we don't know it's a story. We don't know the story of Jesus as like we know the story of Abraham Lincoln or George Washington or whatever. It's not the same thing. We don't have the data for anyone to say Jesus was even a real person. Okay? I think that he was. Most scholars today think that he was. We cannot take that kind of material into the classroom and teach it like history. And that's what people want to do. We can't take that kind of material and take the supernatural deeds out of it and teach them like science. And I'm going to take some Tylenol or something. I am sick tonight, so I haven't been able to think very well. I was kind of scattered all the way through the show tonight.
Colleen says bye, get well.
Yeah. All right. All right, everybody.
Bye, Joni.
Y'all have a great week. Bye-bye.